In the shadowy corners of ancient religious texts lurk laws and commandments that, at first glance, seem both bizarre and deeply unsettling. Among these is the list of forbidden sexual acts and practices found in the Book of Leviticus, a core text of the Hebrew Bible. These laws, which detail everything from incest and bestiality to same-sex relations, have been the subject of intense scrutiny and debate for centuries. They challenge not only our modern sensibilities, but also our understanding of the social and cultural norms of ancient societies. Why were these specific acts deemed so abhorrent? What do they reveal about the theological and ethical frameworks of the ancient Israelites? And why do they continue to resonate, often controversially, in contemporary discussions of morality and law? The Book of Leviticus is clear in its condemnation of the deeds of Egypt and Canaan. These acts, which are described in singular form in the Hebrew, are presented as a collective set of sins that the Israelites must avoid. The text suggests that these deeds, which include various forms of sexual misconduct, were endemic in these two lands. However, a closer examination reveals that this portrayal is likely more a product of cultural projection and religious ideology than historical fact. Egypt, with its complex social structure and religious practices, did indeed have a different set of norms and taboos compared to the Israelites. The practice of sister-brother marriages among the royal families, for example, was well documented. Yet, it is important to note that such practices were not common among the general populace. Similarly, Canaan, a region that encompassed a diverse array of peoples and cultures, had its own unique customs and religious beliefs. The association of both Egypt and Canaan with unbridled sexuality can be seen as a way for the Israelites to define their own identity in opposition to these neighboring cultures. The concept of projecting negative traits onto the other is a common theme in human history. In many cases, it serves to reinforce a sense of moral superiority and to create a clear boundary between one's own group and those perceived as outsiders. The Israelites, who had lived in Egypt and were now establishing themselves in Canaan, may have used this projection to highlight the purity and righteousness of their own laws and practices. The idea that the polytheistic world, with its many gods and goddesses, lacked the moral restraint of the monotheistic Israelite God, further reinforced this distinction. The term statutes, yukot, in the Hebrew text, is often translated to maintain the contrast with God's statutes. However, in context, it can also be understood as habitual practices. This interpretation suggests that the laws and norms described are not just abstract rules, but deeply ingrained behaviors that the Israelites must actively resist. The emphasis on these practices being inscribed or written down also underscores the importance of codifying and transmitting these laws to future generations. In the list of prohibitions, the male is typically singled out as the primary actor. This reflects the patriarchal structure of ancient Israelite society, where men were assumed to take the initiative in sexual matters. The focus on male agency also aligns with the broader cultural norms of the time, where women's roles were often circumscribed by their relationships to men. However, This does not mean that women were entirely passive in these interactions. The inclusion of a prohibition against a woman engaging in bestiality, for example, demonstrates that women were also subject to these laws and could face consequences for violating them. The concept of nakedness, irwa in the Hebrew text, is rich with meaning. While it can be understood as a euphemism for the genitalia, it also carries connotations of vulnerability and shame. The prohibition against uncovering the nakedness of one's mother, for example, extends beyond a simple taboo against incest. It reflects a broader concern with the sanctity of family relationships and the boundaries that must be maintained to preserve social order. The language used in these prohibitions often employs idiomatic expressions and euphemisms, which add a layer of complexity to the text. The phrase, "his own flesh," for instance, emphasizes the closeness and intimacy of the forbidden relationships. This use of language serves to underscore the gravity of the transgressions and the need for strict adherence to the laws. The prohibitions against incestuous relationships reveal a complex set of social and familial boundaries. In many cases, the laws are designed to prevent the mixing of different family lines and to maintain the integrity of the clan. For example, the prohibition against intercourse with one's father's wife, who may not be one's biological mother, reflects the importance of preserving the father's authority and the sanctity of the family unit. The inclusion of specific prohibitions, such as those against intercourse with one's son's daughter, suggests that certain forms of incest were more common or more acceptable in other societies. By explicitly banning these practices, the Israelites were reinforcing their own unique social and moral framework. The absence of an explicit prohibition against intercourse with one's own daughter, however, has led to much speculation. Some scholars argue that this omission reflects the inherent power dynamics within the family, where the father's authority over his daughter was absolute. The prohibition against a man having intercourse with a woman and her sister, while the sister is still alive, reflects the realities of polygamous marriages in ancient societies. The term "to become rivals," Surat, acknowledges the potential for conflict and jealousy among co-wives. This law serves to prevent the escalation of such conflicts and to maintain harmony within the household. It is worth noting that some of the figures in the national narrative of Israel, such as Jacob and David, engaged in practices that would later be deemed taboo. This suggests that the laws in Leviticus may represent a later reform in sexual practices, reflecting the evolving social and moral norms of the Israelites. The laws against adultery are particularly explicit, emphasizing the importance of paternity in a patrilineal society. The act of spilling seed outside of marriage not only violates the sanctity of the marital bond, but also creates the potential for children of dubious paternity. This was a significant concern in a society where lineage and inheritance were closely tied to male descent. One of the most controversial and disturbing laws in Leviticus is the prohibition against dedicating one's child to Melech. Melech is identified as a Canaanite deity, and the practice of child sacrifice was indeed common in some ancient Near Eastern cultures. The verb Passover likely refers to the act of passing the child through fire, either as a form of dedication or as a sacrifice. The severity of this prohibition reflects the deep moral revulsion that the Israelites felt toward this practice. The use of the term seed in this context links the law to the earlier prohibitions against wasting seed in forbidden sexual acts. This connection underscores the importance of preserving the purity and continuity of the Israelite lineage. The prohibition against homosexual acts, particularly anal and intercrural intercourse, is one of the most widely discussed and debated laws in Leviticus. The text describes these acts as a detestable thing, ta'iva, suggesting that they are abhorrent to God. The rationale for this prohibition is often interpreted as a concern with the wasting of seed and the simulation of heterosexual intercourse. It is noteworthy that the text does not explicitly mention other forms of homosexual activity, such as oral sex or mutual masturbation. This has led some scholars to argue that the ban is limited to specific forms of sexual contact that were seen as particularly transgressive. The absence of a similar prohibition against lesbianism has also been the subject of much discussion, with some suggesting that it was not considered a significant issue in the context of ancient Near Eastern culture. The prohibition against bestiality is another example of the Israelites' efforts to maintain clear boundaries between humans and animals. The text specifically mentions a woman presenting herself to a beast, but the omission of a similar prohibition for men is puzzling. This may reflect the different roles and expectations placed on men and women in ancient society. The Holiness Code, which spans from Leviticus 17 to 26, is a comprehensive set of laws and ethical guidelines designed to promote a holy and righteous way of life. The central commandment, "You shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy," serves as the foundation for all the other laws and injunctions. The concept of holiness, kadosh, in the Hebrew Bible is multifaceted, encompassing both the sacred and the pure. To be holy is to be set apart from the ordinary and to live in a way that reflects the character and attributes of God. The laws in the Holiness Code cover a wide range of topics, from sexual morality and family relationships to economic justice and social responsibility. The emphasis on ethical living is particularly evident in the laws that address issues such as honesty, fairness, and compassion. For example, the commandment to love one's neighbor as oneself is a cornerstone of the ethical framework in Leviticus. This law extends beyond the immediate family and community to include sojourners and strangers, reflecting a broader concern for the welfare of all people. The laws and commandments in the Book of Leviticus offer a window into the social, cultural, and religious world of ancient Israel. While some of these laws may seem strange or even repugnant to modern readers, they reflect the deeply held values and beliefs of a people striving to live in accordance with the will of their God. The Holiness Code, with its emphasis on ethical living and the pursuit of holiness, remains a powerful and enduring legacy, one that continues to shape religious and moral discourse to this day.